In the shadows of twilight, where whispers dance on evening breezes and stars begin their silent vigil, some souls learn to stand tall despite broken bodies. Some hearts learn to see beyond physical limitations, because true vision comes from within. And sometimes, in the quiet corners of a world that worships perfection, two imperfect beings discover that the most powerful bonds aren't forged in symmetry, but in the beautiful mosaic of complementary brokenness. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The January morning arrived with a crystalline clarity, cold enough to make Eliza Morgan's joints ache more than usual. She maneuvered her wheelchair onto the small wooden ramp she'd built herself, leading to the physical therapy clinic where she worked. The familiar burn in her shoulders came from pushing against the slight incline, a daily reminder of the strength she'd developed in the years since the accident. Riverdale Physical Therapy Center wasn't much to look at from the outside. A converted Victorian house painted a cheerful yellow, with wide doorways and smooth, ramped entrances. But inside, it was Eliza's kingdom, a place where broken bodies came to heal and where her own limitations became her greatest asset. "Morning, sunshine," called Marcos, her receptionist and self-appointed morale officer. 3 new patients on the schedule today, including Mrs. Henderson, who swears she never do her home exercises, but secretly does them all. Eliza smiled, adjusting the light blanket over her unresponsive legs. At 32, she'd spent more of her life in this wheelchair than out of it. The car accident at 16 had shattered her spine along with her dreams of becoming a dancer, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. But it had also forged her into someone stronger, someone with an intimate understanding of what it meant to rebuild a life from scattered pieces. "Let's get the treatment rooms ready," she said, wheeling toward the back office. "And make sure we have extra resistance bands. The ones we ordered last month are already starting to wear." Eliza's physical therapy practice specialized in patients. Others had given up on the chronic cases, the unfixable ones, the people who'd been told to accept their limitations and move on. She understood better than most how insulting those words could be, how they dismissed the complex journey of adapting to a changed body. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. "Dinner tonight? Brandon wants to introduce his new girlfriend." Eliza sighed. Brandon was her younger brother, perpetually concerned about her lonely spinster status, as he called it, though never to her face. His parade of girlfriends always looked at Eliza with the same mixture of pity and discomfort, their eyes never quite meeting her wheelchair, their conversations filled with overly bright enthusiasm that reeked of condescension. "Sorry, late appointment," she texted back, the lie sliding easily from her fingers. The truth that she couldn't bear another evening of pitying glances and awkward questions about her condition felt too raw to share, even with her well-meaning family. Her first patient arrived promptly at 9, a former construction worker with a crushed hand who'd been told he'd never work again. Eliza watched him struggle through the finger exercises she'd designed, his face contorted with effort and determination. "That's it," she encouraged, demonstrating the movement with her own hands. "Your brain is relearning these pathways. Every repetition rebuilds the connection." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Don't know why I'm bothering," the man grumbled, though he didn't stop the exercise. "Nobody's gonna hire a builder with a claw for a hand." Eliza wheeled closer, meeting his eyes directly. "My father said something similar after his stroke. He was a master carpenter, thought his life was over when he couldn't hold his tools. The same way. Now he builds custom furniture with adaptive equipment. Different methods, same skill." She didn't mention that it had taken her father 3 years of rage and depression before he'd accepted those adaptive tools, or that she'd been the one to research and order them against his protests. Some journeys couldn't be rushed, only supported. By lunchtime, Eliza had seen 4 patients and completed the paperwork for 3 insurance claims, the administrative side of healing that consumed too much of her time. She wheeled herself to the small courtyard behind the clinic, unwrapping her sandwich while enjoying the rare January sunshine. The sound of construction across the street had been her constant companion for the past 2 weeks, a new recreational center being built where an abandoned warehouse had stood for decades. Eliza watched the workers move with practiced efficiency, her eyes drawn to a man who seemed to dwarf everyone around him. He stood at least 6'6", with shoulders broad, enough to carry the weight of the world. Unlike the other workers, who moved with hurried efficiency, he approached each task with deliberate care, checking measurements twice, ensuring perfect alignment before securing any piece. Even from a distance, there was something compelling about his methodical precision. As if sensing her attention, he looked up suddenly, catching her gaze across the busy street. Instead of the quick, embarrassed glance away most people offered when caught staring, he simply nodded, a small acknowledgement that passed between them like a current. Eliza nodded back, surprised by the simple human connection that required no words, no explanations, no careful navigation around her disability. Then he returned to his work and she'd her lunch, but something had shifted imperceptibly in her carefully ordered world. The afternoon brought a new patient, a referral from the county hospital that Eliza had been anticipating with professional curiosity. The file described a complex case: severe burn injuries to the right side of the body, multiple skin grafts, significant mobility limitations, and non-compliance with previous therapy regimens. "Ms. Morgan?" Marcos appeared at her office door. "Your 4 o'clock is here, but—" He hesitated, lowering his voice. "He's refusing to come inside. Says he doesn't want to put on a show for the waiting room." Eliza sighed, understanding. "Immediately. I'll go out to him." She found him sitting in his truck, a massive black pickup with custom controls. Even behind the wheel, she could see he was enormous, and something about the breadth of his shoulders seemed familiar. When he turned toward her approach, recognition clicked into place. The construction worker from across the street, the one who had nodded to her. His face told a story of survival, the right side mapped with burn scars that pulled his mouth into a permanent slight grimace. The scars continued down his neck, disappearing beneath his collar, hinting at more extensive damage hidden by clothing. Eliza wheeled herself directly to the driver's side window, which he lowered after a moment's hesitation. "Mr. Sullivan?" she asked. "I'm Eliza Morgan, your physical therapist." His eyes a startling clear blue against the reddened landscape of his scarred skin widened slightly at the sight of her wheelchair. "They didn't mention," he began, then stopped himself, "that I'm in a wheelchair?" Eliza finished, used to this reaction. "It doesn't affect my ability to help you, though it does give me a unique perspective on rehabilitation." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "The waiting room's full," he finally said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to fit his massive frame. "I don't do audiences." Eliza nodded, understanding completely. "Back entrance," she said, pointing toward the side of the building. "Leads directly to treatment room 3. No audience required." 20 minutes later, she was conducting her initial assessment. Noah Sullivan, 38, injured in a factory explosion 2 years ago. 3rd-degree burns over 40% of his body, primarily right side. Multiple surgeries, skin grafts, and ongoing pain management issues. Previous physical therapy attempts abandoned after minimal progress. "Range of motion in your right shoulder?" she asked, watching as he struggled to raise his arm to shoulder height. "This is it," he said, the frustration evident in his clipped words. "Been stuck at this point for months." Eliza wheeled closer, her clinical eye noting the tension patterns, the compensation happening in his neck and back. "May I?" she asked, hands hovering near his scarred arm. He nodded, a quick jerking motion that betrayed his discomfort with being touched. Eliza's fingers moved with professional precision, feeling for adhesions in the tissue, mapping the landscape of damage and healing. The scar tissue is restricting movement, but there's more mobility potential here, she said, her touch careful, but confident. Your previous therapists focused on traditional range of motion exercises? Tried to, Noah corrected. I couldn't do half of what they wanted. Eventually they suggested I accept my limitations and focus on adaptive strategies instead of restoration. The bitterness in his voice resonated with Eliza's own experience. How many doctors had told her to accept her paralysis, as if acceptance meant surrendering to a diminished existence rather than finding a different path forward. Acceptance doesn't mean giving up, she said quietly. It means understanding. Your starting point so you can map a realistic journey forward. Noah looked at her, for the first time since entering the treatment room. That's not what acceptance usually means in my experience. No, Eliza agreed. Usually it means stop bothering us with your unrealistic expectations of improvement. But that's not how we work here. She wheeled over to her desk, making notes in his file. We'll start with fascial release techniques to address the scar tissue restrictions, then move to targeted strengthening of the supporting muscle groups. I think we can improve your functional range significantly. You sound pretty confident for someone who just met me, Noah observed, though the hostility had faded from his voice. Eliza glanced up, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I've been where you are, Mr. Sullivan. Not with burns, obviously, but with specialists telling me what I couldn't do, couldn't hope for, couldn't expect from my body. Sometimes they're right about the limitations, but they're almost always wrong about what those limitations actually mean for your life. For the next hour, Eliza worked with Noah, demonstrating techniques he could use at home, establishing a baseline for measuring progress, and most importantly listening to what he wanted from therapy, rather than imposing standardized goals. 3 sessions a week to start, she said as they finished. And daily home exercises. This won't be quick or easy, but it will be progress. Noah stood carefully, his massive frame making the treatment room seem suddenly smaller. Why are you so sure? Because you showed up, Eliza said simply. Despite giving up on your previous therapists. Despite hating the idea of coming through that waiting room. You still got in your truck and drove here. That tells me everything I need to know about your chances. After Noah left, Eliza found herself thinking about him throughout her evening. Routine. There was something compelling about his determination, the way he pushed through obvious pain without complaint or self-pity. She recognized in him the same stubborn resilience she'd cultivated in herself, the refusal to be defined by damage. The next morning brought a January snowstorm, transforming Riverdale into a treacherous landscape of ice and slush. Eliza eyed the ramp to her clinic with trepidation. While she could navigate most terrain in her wheelchair, ice presented unique challenges that occasionally resulted in embarrassing falls. She was considering her options when a deep voice spoke from behind her. Need a hand? Noah Sullivan stood there, massive in a heavy work coat, his scarred face reddened by the cold. Construction sites closed for the weather, he explained, gesturing toward the partially built recreation center. Thought I'd come early for my appointment. Eliza hesitated, pride warring with practicality. The ramp gets slippery in weather like this, she admitted finally. I can manage, but it might not be dignified. Noah nodded, understanding her reluctance to accept help. Without further discussion, he moved past her and began clearing the ramp, his large hands making quick work of the snow while his work boots broke up the thin layer of ice beneath. Thank you, Eliza said when he finished. Genuinely grateful, but still uncomfortable with needing assistance. Just evening the score, Noah replied. Since you'll be helping me inside. His therapy session that morning revealed more about Noah Sullivan than just his physical condition. As Eliza worked on the tight fascial restrictions around his shoulder, he spoke haltingly about the accident, the industrial explosion that had killed 2 of his co-workers and left him fighting for his life. "I was the lucky one," he said, wincing as she worked through a particularly tight adhesion. "At least that's what everyone kept telling me in the hospital. Didn't feel lucky. Still doesn't some days." "Survivor's guilt is real," Eliza responded, her hands never pausing in their therapeutic movements. "And being told you're lucky when you're in excruciating pain feels like a special kind of cruelty." Noah's eyes met hers with startled recognition. "Exactly. How did you—" "Car accident, 16 years ago," she explained, gesturing toward her wheelchair. "I survived. My best friend didn't. Everyone told me how blessed I was to be alive, as if I should be grateful for a severed spinal cord and survivor's guilt." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of shared experience that transcended the professional boundary of therapist and patient. Not romantic, not yet, but a connection based on mutual understanding of what it meant to rebuild a life from catastrophic loss. "Does it get easier?" Noah asked, the question hanging between them like a fragile thing. Eliza considered her answer carefully. "Not easier," she finally said. "Different. The grief changes shape. The pain becomes something you carry, rather. And something that carries you. And eventually, you build something new from what remains." By the end of January, Noah had become Eliza's first appointment every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The staff noticed the subtle shifts in their boss's routine, the extra care with her appearance on Noah days, the way she wheeled herself to the window when his truck pulled into the parking lot, the lingering conversations that extended beyond his allotted therapy time. "He likes you," Marcos observed one afternoon after Noah had left, "and not just as his miracle-working therapist." "Don't be ridiculous," Eliza responded automatically, though a warmth crept into her cheeks. "He's my patient. And besides, men don't see women in wheelchairs that way." Marcos raised an eyebrow. "Some men don't. The one's not worth your time anyway. But that one? He sees you, Eliza, all of you." She dismissed the comment, but found herself thinking about it later that night as she prepared for bed. The truth was, Noah Sullivan did see her differently than most men had since her accident. He didn't shout unnecessary offers of help, didn't speak to her slowly as if physical disability equated to cognitive impairment, didn't avoid mentioning her wheelchair or pretend not to notice it. Instead, he treated her wheelchair as simply another fact about her, like her auburn hair or her preference for Earl Grey tea. He asked for help without embarrassment and offered it without presumption. Their conversations ranged from physical rehabilitation techniques to favorite books to the quiet peace of early mornings when the world still slept. And yes, sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression that made her heart beat faster, an appreciation that had nothing to do with sympathy and everything to do with genuine interest. But even if Marcos was right, even if Noah did see her as a woman rather than just a therapist in a wheelchair, what then? The professional boundaries were clear. And beyond that, Eliza had learned the hard way that relationships required careful navigation when disability was involved. Too many potential partners either fetishized her disability or sought to heroically overcome it, both approaches equally dehumanizing. Better to maintain professional distance, she decided. Better to keep their relationship focused on his rehabilitation, where she could offer real value without risking her heart. That resolution lasted exactly 3 days until Noah arrived for his Friday appointment with an unexpected proposal. "The rec center's having a preview event tomorrow," he said as she worked on mobilizing his shoulder. "Community walkthrough before the official opening next month. I helped design the adaptive access features. Thought you might want to see them." Eliza's hands paused briefly. "Are you asking me on a date, Mr. Sullivan?" No, he said quickly, then reconsidered. Maybe, would that be inappropriate? Because of this. He gestured between them, indicating their therapist-patient relationship. Eliza resumed her therapeutic manipulation, buying time to consider her response. It would be unusual, she admitted, but not strictly inappropriate, as long as it doesn't interfere with your treatment. So, is that a yes? She looked up to find him watching her with that intense blue gaze that seemed to see past all her carefully constructed professional barriers. Yes, she heard herself say, but not as a date, as professional colleagues with shared interests. In adaptive architecture. Noah's scarred face broke into a rare smile, transforming his features. Professional colleagues, he repeated, the words carrying a warmth that belied their formality. Tomorrow at 2 then. I'll pick you up. That night, Eliza found herself doing something she hadn't done in years, standing before her closet, critically evaluating her wardrobe for something other than professional functionality. The nervous flutter in her stomach felt foreign and almost forgotten, a reminder of the young woman she'd been before the accident, the one who had dreamed of romance and connection without the complicating factor of paralysis. This is not a date, she reminded her reflection as she applied a touch of makeup the next morning. This is a professional consultation on adaptive architecture. Her heart, however, seemed unconvinced. Noah arrived precisely at 2, his massive truck gleaming in the winter sunshine. He had exchanged his usual work clothes for dark jeans and a button-down shirt that stretched across his broad shoulders. The right side remained deeply scarred, but Eliza noticed he'd made no attempt to hide the damage, no high collar or long sleeves despite the cold. You look nice, he said as he helped her into the passenger seat, lifting her wheelchair into the truck bed with effortless strength. The simple compliment warmed her more than it should have. The recreational center stood nearly complete, a modern structure of glass and steel, with surprising touches of warmth in the wood accents and stone features. Noah moved through the space with quiet pride, pointing out features he'd specifically designed or modified. The traditional accessibility standards are bare minimum, he explained, showing her how the counters adjusted to multiple heights. I wanted to create spaces that didn't just accommodate differences but celebrated them. Eliza wheeled herself through wide corridors with gently sloped transitions instead of ramps, past exercise equipment designed for users with various mobility needs, and into a dance studio with mirrors that could be adjusted to different heights. The chair is part of you, but it's not all of you. Just like these, he gestured to his scars, are part of me, but not the whole story. The directness of his gaze made her breath catch. For the first time in years, Eliza felt herself being truly seen, not as a broken thing to be pitied or an inspirational story to be admired from a distance, but as a complete human being with desires and frustrations and hopes. By the time Noah drove her home, something fundamental had shifted between them. This was no longer merely a therapist and her patient, nor even friendly colleagues with shared professional interests. This was something rarer and more precious too. People who understood each other's wounds without being defined by them. Standing at her door, she in her wheelchair, he towering above with his scarred face turned partially away from the porch light. They hesitated in that ancient dance of new connection, neither quite sure how to end the evening. Thank you, Noah said finally. For seeing the center, for the coffee, for, he gestured vaguely, everything else. Eliza smiled up at him, suddenly fearless in a way she hadn't felt since before her accident. I'm still your physical therapist, she said. But I'd like to see you again. Like this, outside the clinic. Noah's scarred face broke into that rare, transformative smile. I'd like that too. As his truck pulled away, Eliza wheeled herself inside, her heart lighter than it had been in years. In a world that had tried to convince them both that they were somehow less than whole, they had found in each other a recognition of their complete humanity, scars, wheels, and all. Their unexpected connection blossomed through winter's coldest, days-stolen moments that warmed even February's bitterest chill. For Eliza Morgan, the carefully constructed walls around her heart began to crack and shift, allowing light to filter through spaces that had remained shadowed for years. For Noah Sullivan, the world that had shrunk to the painful dimensions of his scarred body slowly expanded again, making room for possibilities he'd long since abandoned. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Their courtship unfolded in unconventional spaces therapy sessions, where professional boundaries gradually softened around the edges. Saturday afternoons exploring the newly completed recreation center, quiet dinners in restaurants Noah had carefully researched for wheelchair accessibility. Each encounter revealed new layers of understanding between them, forging connections stronger than either had dared to hope for since their respective accidents. "You're distracted today," Marcos observed one Monday morning as Eliza reviewed patient files. "And you're smiling at that insurance paperwork like it contains love poetry instead of billing codes." Eliza attempted to compose her expression into something more professionally appropriate, but found the smile returning unbidden. "Just in a good mood," she deflected, though she knew Marcos wasn't fooled. He replied, his knowing grin widening. "Nothing to do with the enormous builder who drops by with coffee every morning before his appointment? The one who installed that new accessibility ramp over the weekend? The one who looks at you like you hung the moon and stars?" "He's a patient," Eliza reminded him, though the words had lost their conviction. The truth was more complicated. Noah remained her patient, receiving therapy 3 times weekly, but he had also become something else, something that defied simple categorization. "Patients don't look at their therapist the way he looks at you," Marcos countered. "And therapists don't blush when patients enter the room." Before Eliza could formulate a response, the front door chimed, announcing Noah's arrival. As if summoned by their conversation, he appeared in the doorway, his massive frame making the reception area seem suddenly smaller. In his hands were 3 coffee cups, a now familiar morning ritual. "Earl Grey for Miss Morgan," he said, his scarred face lifting into the smile that transformed his features. "Caramel macchiato for Marcos. And black coffee for myself, because some stereotypes about construction workers are accurate." The easy camaraderie between Noah and her staff had developed naturally over the weeks of his treatment. His initial reluctance to be seen had gradually given way to quiet confidence as he realized that no one at Riverdale Physical Therapy Center defined him by his scars. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Later, during his therapy session, Eliza noticed significant improvement in Noah's range of motion. His right shoulder, once frozen by scar tissue and protective muscle guarding, now moved with greater freedom. The daily exercises were working, slowly reclaiming territory once thought permanently lost. "You've gained another 15 degrees of abduction," she noted, measuring the angle with practiced precision. "And the quality of movement is smoother. Less compensation from your neck and back." Noah rotated his shoulder carefully, his expression betraying surprise at the reduced pain. "Doesn't feel like I'm tearing something anymore," he admitted. "Just tight, not agonizing." "That's the fascial release techniques working," Eliza explained, her hands demonstrating on her own shoulder. The scar tissue is becoming more pliable, allowing the underlying structures to move more naturally. Noah watched her movements with the intensity that had become familiar, that focused attention that made Eliza feel simultaneously seen and exposed. "You're good at this," he said simply. "Better than anyone else who's worked on me." "I have a vested interest in your recovery," she replied, then blushed at the implication of her words. Noah's eyes softened. "Professional interest, of course." "Of course," she agreed, though they both recognized the half-truth in her response. The professional boundary between them had been maintained through silent agreement, a thin line neither crossed during therapy sessions. But outside those sessions, in the hours they increasingly spent together, that boundary blurred and shifted until it existed more as a formality than a true separation. "The recreation center opens officially next weekend," Noah said as she recorded his progress in his file. "There's a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Nothing fancy, just the mayor saying a few words, then a community open house." He hesitated, then added, "I'd like you to be there." "With me?" Eliza looked up from her notes. "As your physical therapist? To highlight the adaptive features?" "As my date," Noah clarified, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his request. "Publicly, officially, no more professional pretense." The invitation hung between them, weighted with implications. A public appearance together would announce a relationship beyond therapist and patient, beyond casual friends. It would invite questions, assumptions, curiosity from a community where both were known. "People will talk," Eliza said, voicing her immediate concern. "People always talk," Noah countered. "But I'm not asking for their sake. I'm asking for ours." Eliza considered his words, feeling the familiar tension between caution and desire. Since her accident, relationships had been exercises in disappointment and disillusionment, initial attraction giving way to pity, fetishization, or abandonment once the reality of her disability became fully apparent. She had learned to protect herself through professional distance and carefully managed expectations, but Noah was different. His own scars had taught him what hers had taught her, that the world rarely made space for damaged bodies, that love often failed when tested by physical limitations. Yet here he was, offering not just private acceptance, but public acknowledgement of whatever was growing between them. "Yes," she said finally, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I'd like that." The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew a larger crowd than expected, with nearly half the town turning out to celebrate the new recreation center. Eliza arrived independently, having declined Noah's offer to pick her up. Some habits of self-sufficiency were hard to break, and maintaining separate arrivals felt like a small insurance policy against total vulnerability. She positioned her wheelchair near the front of the gathered crowd, watching as the mayor delivered a predictably boastful speech about community investment and forward-thinking development. Noah stood among the construction team, towering above his colleagues, his scarred profile turned slightly away from the crowd's direct view, a habitual positioning she'd noticed he employed in public spaces. When the ceremonial ribbon was finally cut, releasing the crowd to explore the new facility, Noah made his way directly to her side. Without hesitation, he leaned down to kiss her cheek in greeting, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder, a clear statement to anyone watching that they were together. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I said I would," she replied, reaching up to squeeze his hand. "Though I'm still not sure what I'm supposed to do as your date at a community open house." Noah smiled, transforming his scarred face. "Just be with me. That's enough." They moved through the recreation center together, Noah occasionally stopping to explain construction details to curious residents or answer questions about specific features. Eliza noticed the reactions their partnership elicited, the sideways glances, the poorly concealed surprise, the occasional whispered comment behind hands. But she also noticed something unexpected, admiration. "You two make quite the pair," observed Eleanor Winters, the town's longtime librarian, as they paused near the adjustable basketball hoops. The comment could have been laden with condescension, but instead carried genuine warmth. "Thank you," Noah replied simply, his hand finding Eliza's shoulder in what was becoming a familiar gesture of connection. Later, as they shared coffee in the center's new cafe, Eliza found herself relaxing into the public nature of their relationship. The anticipated discomfort of being seen as a couple, him with his visible burns, her in her wheelchair, had given way to something approaching. Pride. They had survived catastrophic losses, rebuilt shattered lives, and found each other against overwhelming odds. What was there to hide in that? What are you thinking? Noah asked, noticing her contemplative expression. That I expected to feel more self-conscious today, she admitted. Being seen with you like this, but instead I feel defiant, he suggested when she hesitated. Validated, she corrected. Like we're proving something important just by existing together in public. Noah's expression softened. We are. We're proving that there's life after everything breaks different. Life, maybe, but still worth living. The weeks that followed saw their relationship deepen with a speed that might have frightened Eliza, had it been anyone but Noah. His patient determination, the same quality that had helped him survive devastating injuries, extended to their growing connection. He never pushed past her comfort level, but remained steadfastly present, willing to navigate the complex territory of loving someone whose body carried limitations different from but complementary to his own. They developed wordless systems of support, Noah instinctively positioning himself on her right side to compensate for the reduced mobility in his right arm. Eliza naturally reaching for objects that required fine motor control his scarred hand couldn't manage. They learned to move together through spaces not designed for either of them, creating choreography that accommodated both wheelchair and burn-restricted movement. We look like we've been doing this for years, Noah observed one evening as they prepared dinner in Eliza's kitchen, a space she had modified for wheelchair access, but that still required adaptation for Noah's height and limited right side function. Maybe we have been, Eliza replied, passing him a cutting board positioned for left-handed use. Just not together. The comment held more truth than she'd initially recognized. They had both spent years developing strategies to navigate a world built for bodies unlike their own. Now those strategies intertwined, creating something stronger and more effective than either had managed alone. Not every moment was easy. Eliza's fierce independence occasionally clashed with Noah's protective instincts, leading to tense conversations about capability versus assistance. Noah's lingering self-consciousness about his scarring sometimes resurfaced in public settings, prompting retreats into silence that Eliza learned to recognize and gently address. And there were physical challenges neither could ignore. Intimacy required communication more explicit than either had experienced in previous relationships, discussions of what was possible, what caused pain, what adaptations might work. But in that vulnerability came an honesty that deepened their connection beyond physical expression. I never thought I'd have this again, Noah confessed one night, lying beside her in the specialized bed that accommodated her paralysis. Not just sex, though. I definitely thought that was off the table permanently, but this kind of closeness. Being seen completely and not found wanting. Eliza traced the boundary between scarred and unscarred skin on his chest, feeling the textural difference beneath her fingertips. I stopped hoping for it, she admitted. It seemed safer to build a life that didn't require someone else's acceptance. And now? She considered the question, the weight of potential disappointment balanced against the reality of what they'd already built together. Now I'm terrified, she said honestly. Because having found this, losing it would hurt more than never having it at all. Noah's hand covered hers where it rested on his chest. I'm not going anywhere. People always say that, she replied, the ghost of past abandonments shadowing her words, until they don't. Then I won't say it, he countered. I'll just be here, day after day, until you believe it through evidence rather than promises. Their relationship faced its first significant test when Noah's therapy reached its clinical conclusion. After 3 months of intensive work, he had regained nearly 80% of his former range of motion, a result both of them considered miraculous given his previous plateaued progress. I can't justify continuing your therapy under insurance. Eliza explained during their final official session. Your functional goals have been met, and continuing would constitute maintenance rather than rehabilitation. The shift represented more than just a change in their professional relationship. It removed the structured reason for their regular contact, the legitimate excuse for their hands on each other's bodies, the framework that had supported their growing connection. So what happens now? Noah asked, standing in her office doorway. After their session, his massive frame filling the space with an uncertainty she rarely saw in him. Now we date like normal people, Eliza replied, attempting to lighten the moment. Without insurance paperwork documenting our every interaction. Noah smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. And if I need a physical therapist in the future? For maintenance, or if something regresses? The question carried layers of meaning: concern about the ethical implications of their relationship, fear that without the professional connection, their personal one might falter, uncertainty about how to transition from patient-therapist to simply partners. Then you'll see Maria at the hospital outpatient clinic, Eliza said firmly. I can't be both your therapist and your... She hesitated, realizing they had never formally defined what they were to each other. Your what? Noah pressed, moving into the office and closing the door behind him. What am I to you, Eliza? The directness of the question caught her off guard. They had been together nearly every day for months, had shared intimacies both physical and emotional, had created a partnership that supported both their needs. Yet they had carefully avoided labeling what existed between them, as if naming it might somehow jinx its continued existence. My partner, she said finally. My equal. The person who sees me completely and stays anyway. Noah crossed the room in 2 long strides, kneeling before her wheelchair to bring his face level with hers. Despite the clinical setting, despite the boundary they had maintained throughout his treatment, he reached for her hands. Then be the same for me, he said, his voice low and intense. Not my therapist, but my partner. My equal. The person who sees all of me, the scars, the limitations, the nightmares that still wake me some nights and stays anyway. The moment stretched between them, weighted with significance. Then Eliza leaned forward, closing the distance between them with a kiss that acknowledged the end of one relationship and the continuation of another, deeper one. That evening, they celebrated Noah's discharge from therapy with dinner at Riverdale's nicest restaurant, a farm-to-table establishment overlooking the river that had given the town its name. Noah had called ahead to ensure accessibility and had requested a table away from the main dining area, accommodating both Eliza's wheelchair and his own discomfort with public scrutiny. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass in toast. And successful endings, she replied, clinking her glass against his. 80% range of motion is remarkable given where you started. I had an excellent therapist, Noah responded with a smile. Though I think my motivation might have exceeded the average patient's. Their conversation flowed easily, touching on plans for the coming weeks, a weekend trip to the coast, Noah's continued work with the construction company, Eliza's growing patient list at the clinic. The future stretched before them, ordinary in its details, but extraordinary in its existence. 2 people who had been told repeatedly to lower their expectations, to accept diminished lives, were instead building something expansive and hopeful. Together, as they finished their meal, Noah grew uncharacteristically quiet, his scarred hand fidgeting with his napkin in a nervous gesture Eliza had rarely observed in him. What is it? She asked, concern creeping into her voice. Are you in pain? He shook his head. Not physical pain, no. But I'm terrified of what I want to say next. The admission of fear from someone as seemingly indomitable as Noah Sullivan sent a chill through Eliza. In their months together, she had seen him face physical pain, public scrutiny, and difficult therapy with stoic determination. Whatever caused this level of anxiety must be significant. Tell me, she urged, reaching across the table to still his restless hand. Noah took a deep breath, then met her gaze directly. "I love you," he said simply. "Not despite your wheelchair or because of some inspirational story about overcoming adversity. I love you, your brilliance, your determination, your capacity for understanding pain without being defined by it. I love the life we're building together, and I want to keep building it. Permanently." The words hung between them, honest and exposed. Eliza felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming relief of being truly seen and chosen by someone who understood both her strength and vulnerability. "I love you too," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion tightening her throat. "Not despite your scars or because you've overcome them. I love your patience, your careful hands, the way you build spaces that accommodate difference instead of ignoring it. I love how we fit together in all the ways that matter." Noah's expression transformed, joy replacing anxiety as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Then marry me," he said, opening the box to reveal a ring simple and elegant, designed to withstand the active work of Eliza's hands. "Marry me and let's show the world what love looks like when it's built on truth instead of illusion." Eliza stared at the ring, then at the man offering it, his scarred face open and vulnerable, his massive body somehow appearing smaller in this moment of complete emotional exposure. The future they could build together unfolded in her mind, a life of mutual support and understanding, of challenges faced together rather than alone, of love that recognized limitation without being diminished by it. "Yes," she said, the word emerging with absolute certainty. "Yes, I'll marry you." As Noah slipped the ring onto her finger, Eliza found herself thinking of all the doctors, therapists, and well-meaning friends who had counseled her to accept her limitations after her accident. They had been right about acceptance, but wrong about what it meant. True acceptance wasn't lowering expectations or settling for less. It was understanding reality clearly enough to build something beautiful within its constraints. In Noah's scarred face, in his eyes that looked at her with complete recognition, she saw the truth they had both discovered. Sometimes the most broken pieces create the strongest bonds when fitted together with care and purpose. Their damaged bodies had taught them to build differently, not lesser lives, but more intentional ones, constructed with precision and meaning where nothing could be taken for granted. "We're going to have an interesting wedding," Noah observed with a smile, his hand still holding hers across the table. "People won't know whether to call it inspiring or uncomfortable." "Let them call it whatever they want," Eliza replied, squeezing his fingers. "We'll know what it really is. And what's that? A beginning that honors everything that came before, the accidents, the losses, the rebuilding. Not despite those things, but because of them. Because they brought us here to each other." As they left the restaurant that night, Noah walking beside Eliza's wheelchair, their movements synchronized through months of practice, they embodied a truth few understood, that wholeness could exist within broken boundaries, that limitation could expand possibility, and that love, when built on genuine acceptance, could transform even the most damaged landscapes into something beautiful and new. News of their engagement spread through Riverdale like wildfire, eliciting reactions as varied as the town's residents themselves. Some celebrated the unexpected romance between the wounded builder and the wheelchair-bound therapist, while others whispered behind hands about practicalities and challenges the couple would face. Through it all, Eliza and Noah remained steadfast in their commitment, their shared experiences of living in bodies deemed broken by society providing a foundation stronger than any doubt cast their way. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first true test of their engagement came not from external skeptics, but from within Eliza's family. Her monthly dinner with her parents, long postponed but finally unavoidable, loomed on the calendar like an approaching storm. Eliza had informed them of her engagement via phone, receiving polite congratulations that couldn't quite mask their surprise and concern. "They're worried," she explained to Noah as they prepared for the dinner. "Not just about the usual in-law anxieties, but about whether we've thought this through, the practical realities." Noah nodded, understanding immediately. "They think we're setting ourselves up for failure. Two disabled people trying to build a life together when either one of us might need assistance." "Exactly," Eliza sighed, adjusting her blouse one final time before wheeling away from the mirror. "They've spent 16 years watching me fight for independence, and now they're afraid I'm jeopardizing it by choosing a partner who has his own physical challenges." Noah knelt beside her wheelchair, bringing his scarred face level with hers. "Then we'll show them what we already know, that our challenges don't cancel each other out. They complement each other. Together, we're stronger than either of us." Alone, the Morgan family home sat on a quiet street lined with mature oak trees, its exterior meticulously maintained by Eliza's father, who channeled his anxieties into home improvement projects. A wheelchair ramp built within weeks of Eliza's accident and improved repeatedly over the years curved elegantly from the driveway to the front door. "They've adapted every inch of this house for me," Eliza said quietly as Noah helped her from the truck. "If only they'd adapted their expectations as thoroughly." Inside, Eliza's parents greeted them with careful politeness. Richard Morgan, a retired engineer whose precise movements echoed his daughter's, shook Noah's hand with firm assessment. Catherine Morgan, a pediatrician whose compassionate eyes had witnessed a lifetime of children's struggles, embraced Eliza with the slightly too tight hug that had become her trademark since the accident. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Noah, welcome," Catherine said, her smile genuine if cautious. "We've heard so much about you." The silent addition, though not nearly enough, hung unspoken in the air. Dinner began pleasantly enough, with conversation flowing through safe topics: the new recreation center Noah had helped build, Eliza's expanding therapy practice, local politics, and weather. Noah impressed them with his thoughtful responses and genuine interest in their lives, his size somehow less intimidating, as he spoke of architectural adaptations and community access projects with passionate expertise. The carefully maintained civility cracked only when Richard refilled wine glasses and raised his in a toast. "To your engagement," he said, his voice carrying a hint of the concern he'd been suppressing all evening. "And to careful planning for the future." "Dad," Eliza warned, recognizing the opening salvo of a conversation they'd been dancing around. "It's a fair point, Eliza," her father continued, setting his glass down. "Marriage is challenging enough for anyone. Your circumstances, both of you, add complexities that deserve serious consideration." Noah's scarred hand found Eliza's. Under the table, a silent communication of solidarity. "We've had those considerations, sir," he responded calmly. "Every day, in fact. Our limitations aren't theoretical to us, they're our lived reality." Catherine leaned forward, motherly concern overriding social niceties. "Noah, we don't doubt your commitment or your character. But there are practical questions that need answering. What happens if one of you needs care the other can't physically provide? What about children? Financial security if either condition worsens?" "Mom," Eliza interjected, her cheeks flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "It's okay," Noah said, squeezing her hand gently. "These are valid questions." He turned to face Catherine directly. "Mrs. Morgan, I understand your concerns. They're the same ones we've discussed extensively. The difference is that we're approaching them not as insurmountable obstacles, but as problems to be solved, like any couple faces. But they're not like any other couple's problems. Richard countered. Eliza can't walk. You have limited use of your dominant arm and ongoing pain issues. These aren't small considerations. No, Noah agreed. They're not small. But they're known quantities. We're not entering this with illusions or denial. He gestured toward his scarred face. We've both had our illusions burned away literally, in my case. What remains is clearer vision, not blindness. The tension around the table thickened, years of unspoken fears and hopes colliding in the space between parent and child. Eliza had seen this expression on her father's face before, the same look he'd worn when she'd announced she was moving into her own apartment, when she'd opened her therapy practice, when she'd done anything that struck him as risking the fragile independence she'd fought so hard to achieve. "Dad," she said softly, "do you remember what you told me when I said I wanted to live alone?" Richard's expression softened slightly. "I said I was terrified. And what else?" "That being terrified wasn't reason enough to stop you from living your life," Eliza nodded. "This is the same conversation. Different circumstances, same fear. I understand it, I share it sometimes. But Noah and I aren't entering this marriage thinking it will be easy or that our challenges will magically disappear. We're under no illusions," Noah added. "But we've both learned that the world doesn't make accommodations unless you demand them. So we'll demand them, design them, build them ourselves if necessary, just as we've both been doing since our accidents." Catherine studied them for a long moment, her clinical eye assessing what lay beneath their words. "You've really thought this through," she said finally, not quite a question. "Every angle," Eliza confirmed. "The practical, the emotional, the financial. We have contingency plans for different scenarios. We're not naive romantics ignoring reality. If anything," Noah added, "we're hyper-realists who found someone who understands the daily calculations and adaptations living in our bodies requires." The remainder of dinner shifted subtly after that exchange, not to complete acceptance, but to cautious respect for the evident thought and commitment underpinning Eliza and Noah's decision. When they prepared to leave, Richard pulled Noah aside, while Catherine helped Eliza with her coat. "I need to ask you something man to man," Richard said quietly, his engineer's precision evident in how carefully he chose his words. "Do you truly believe you can provide what my daughter needs, not just emotionally, but practically for a lifetime?" Noah considered the question with equal care. "Sir, I believe we can provide what each other needs together. There will be things I can't do for her, and things she can't do for me. But between us and the resources we build around us, we'll create a life that works." Richard studied Noah's scarred face, searching for any hesitation or uncertainty. Finding none, he nodded once, not full endorsement, but acknowledgement of the integrity behind Noah's answer. "She's stronger than anyone I've ever known," he said finally. "Has been since she was a little girl, long before the accident. But being strong doesn't mean she doesn't get hurt." "I know," Noah replied simply. "The same is true for me." In the truck driving home, Eliza released a breath she felt she'd been holding all evening. "That went better than I expected," she admitted. "They love you," Noah observed. "Their concerns come from that place." "I know, but love that doesn't make room for my choices isn't the kind of love I need." She reached for his hand. "Thank you for being so patient with them. They're not wrong to worry," he said. "Marriage is hard enough without our additional challenges. But they're missing what we've already proven, that together we found solutions neither of us could create alone." The wedding planning began in earnest the following week, each decision illuminating the unique considerations their circumstances required. Venue selection prioritized not just aesthetics but comprehensive accessibility, not merely for the bride, but for guests with various mobility needs. The traditional processional was reimagined to honor Eliza's wheelchair rather than disguise it. Noah's ceremonial attire was designed to accommodate his limited Right arm mobility while celebrating rather than concealing his scars. What about the first dance? Asked Jenny, their enthusiastic but sometimes obtuse wedding coordinator, during one planning session. The question hung awkwardly in the air, highlighting the societal expectation that weddings follow certain prescribed patterns regardless of individual circumstances. "We'll have one," Eliza said firmly. "Just not standing," Noah nodded. "We've been working on it for weeks." The dance they had created together was unlike any traditional wedding dance, a choreographed duet that incorporated Eliza's wheelchair and Noah's limited range of motion into a fluid, intimate performance set, to music that honored both their limitations and capabilities. They had designed it during evening sessions at the recreation center, using the adaptive dance studio Noah had insisted on including in the building's plans. Each wedding detail required similar creative adaptations of tradition. The ring exchange acknowledged Noah's reduced dexterity in his right hand. The reception seating arranged guests in configurations that facilitated both wheelchair navigation and comfortable positioning for Noah's scarred body, which sometimes stiffened painfully after prolonged sitting. "It's exhausting," Eliza admitted one evening, looking at their growing list of adaptations and accommodations. "Sometimes I wonder if eloping wouldn't be simpler." "Probably," Noah agreed, massaging his right shoulder where the scar tissue had tightened after a long day on the construction site. "But there's something important about doing this publicly, visibly. Making a statement, not intentionally, but inevitably." He moved behind her wheelchair, his large hands working the knots of tension from her shoulders with practiced care. "People need to see that love doesn't require perfect bodies, that commitment isn't limited to those who can walk down aisles or dance traditional waltzes." The truth of his words resonated with Eliza. Their wedding wasn't just a personal celebration, but a visible declaration that joy, connection, and commitment belong to all bodies, even though society labeled as broken or incomplete. As the wedding date approached, unexpected allies emerged to support their vision. The owners of Riverdale's most scenic venue waived their usual fee after Noah consulted on accessibility improvements to their historic building. Eliza's patients organized a surprise wedding shower that thoughtfully accommodated both her wheelchair and Noah's discomfort with crowded spaces. The town's best seamstress approached them with designs for wedding attire that honored rather than disguised their physical realities. "People are kinder than I expected," Eliza remarked, reading the latest in a series of touching RSVP notes that expressed genuine joy for their union. "Most people want to do right," Noah observed. "They just don't always know how until someone shows them." The wedding week arrived with the usual flurry of last-minute details and unexpected challenges. Noah's sister flew in from Seattle, bringing her 3 children who regarded their uncle's scarred appearance with unfiltered curiosity rather than the carefully masked discomfort adults often displayed. "Uncle Noah, does your face hurt?" asked 7-year-old Emily during the rehearsal dinner, her voice carrying in the momentary lull of conversation. The room tensed collectively, but Noah responded with the matter-of-fact honesty he always used when discussing his injuries. "Sometimes it feels tight, like wearing a mask that's too small, but most days I forget about it until I see a mirror." "Oh," Emily considered this. "Like how Aunt Eliza probably forgets about her wheelchair until she sees stairs." "Exactly. Like that," Noah confirmed, catching Eliza's eye across the table with a smile. "Very smart observation." That simple exchange, a child's unvarnished question and an honest answer, seemed to release a lingering tension among the gathered family members. Conversations flowed more naturally afterward, focusing on the couple's future plans rather than the challenges of their past. Later that night, in the quiet of Eliza's apartment, where Noah had gradually moved most of his belongings, they sat together on the specialized bed that accommodated her paralysis and his scarring, reviewing final details for the ceremony. "Are you nervous?" Noah asked, noticing Eliza's distracted expression. Not about marrying you, she clarified, but about being the center of attention tomorrow. Having everyone watching us, some waiting for proof that we've bitten off more than we can chew. Noah nodded, understanding perfectly. They had both grown accustomed to being observed, Eliza in her wheelchair, Noah with his scarred face. The wedding would amplify that scrutiny, inviting judgment from even well-meaning guests. We've spent our lives being stared at, he said, his scarred hand finding hers. At least tomorrow it will be for something we've chosen rather than something that happened to us. The wedding day dawned clear and mild, perfect weather for the outdoor ceremony they had planned in the recreation center's courtyard, a space Noah had designed with multiple levels of accessibility. Eliza prepared with her mother and closest friends in a specially adapted bridal suite, her gown custom designed to drape elegantly over her wheelchair rather than attempting to disguise it. You look radiant, Catherine said, tears gathering in her eyes as she fastened the antique pearl necklace that had belonged to Eliza's grandmother around her daughter's neck. Do I look like a bride? Eliza asked, suddenly vulnerable. Or just a woman in a wheelchair wearing white? Catherine knelt beside her daughter's chair, meeting her eyes directly. You look like yourself, which is the most beautiful thing any bride can be. The ceremony began precisely at noon, with Noah waiting at the altar, not standing at the top of steps as tradition might dictate, but positioned on a gentle slope that eliminated the need for any stairs or ramps. When Eliza appeared at the courtyard entrance, a ripple of emotion passed through the assembled guests. She had decided against being given away, rejecting the imagery of transfer from one caretaker to another, and instead propelled her wheelchair independently down the aisle, the specially designed wheels gliding smoothly over the pathway Noah had insisted be constructed with absolutely level stonework. Her dress caught the sunlight, transforming her wheelchair from medical equipment to a throne bearing a queen to her chosen king. Noah watched her approach with undisguised wonder, his scarred face alight with joy so evident that several guests were moved to tears. When she reached him, he knelt beside her wheelchair, not out of necessity, but choice, bringing their faces level for the vows they had written themselves. Eliza, Noah began, his deep voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. Before I met you, I had learned to exist with pain, to function despite limitation. But you taught me to live again, not by fixing what was broken, but by showing me that brokenness itself can be a pathway to deeper understanding. He took her hands in his scarred right hand and strong left holding both of hers. I promise to build our life together the way we've learned to navigate the world, with creativity, persistence, and the courage to demand space for our whole, imperfect selves. I promise to see you completely, to honor your independence while offering my strength, and to remember always that our limitations are not obstacles to overcome, but parts of the unique landscape we travel together. Eliza's voice trembled slightly as she began her own vows, the carefully memorized words flowing from a heart too full for perfect recitation. Noah, you came into my life when I had convinced myself that certain doors were permanently closed, that deep partnership wasn't possible for someone whose body worked as mine does. She squeezed his hands, drawing strength from their solid warmth. You showed me that true accessibility isn't about ramps or modified equipment, but about creating space where all of who we are is welcomed and valued. I promise to continue building that space with you, to navigate the terrain of our life together with honesty and grace, and to remember always that love doesn't require perfect bodies, only willing hearts and minds determined to find a way forward together. The exchange of rings, adapted to accommodate Noah's limited dexterity, was followed by a pronouncement of marriage that the guests greeted with enthusiastic applause. But it was the first dance that most would remember years later, the moment when Noah took his place beside Eliza's wheelchair, and together they performed the choreography they had created. Sect 2, what a wonderful world. Their dance incorporated both the wheelchair's movements and Noah's careful positioning. At key moments, he lifted her from the chair into carefully supported embraces that showcased both his strength and her trust. Other sequences featured Eliza guiding her wheelchair in graceful patterns around Noah as he moved with deliberate precision that honored his body's capabilities rather than pushing past painful limitations. It wasn't a traditional waltz or even a recognizable dance style from any established tradition. Instead, it was something entirely their own, a physical manifestation of the partnership they had built, where each compensated for the other's limitations while celebrating their combined strengths. When the music ended and Noah carefully settled Eliza back into her wheelchair, the silence that had fallen over the reception erupted into applause more enthusiastic than polite, recognition that what they had witnessed wasn't an awkward accommodation of disability, but a genuine expression of love's creative power. Later, as evening fell and the celebration continued around them, Eliza and Noah found a quiet moment alone in the courtyard where they had exchanged their vows. Stars appeared in the darkening sky above, and somewhere in the distance, the river that gave Riverdale its name murmured its ancient song of continuity and change. "Mrs. Sullivan," Noah said, the name still new and wonderful on his tongue. "Mr. Morgan Sullivan," Eliza corrected with a smile, reminding him of their decision to combine names rather than follow in tradition. "Hyphenated revolutionaries," he agreed, kneeling beside her wheelchair to kiss her softly. "Do you think we've proven anything today, to your parents? To the doubters?" Eliza considered the question, thinking of the faces she'd seen throughout the day, her father's pride as he toasted them at dinner, her mother's tears during the ceremony, the guests who had approached them with genuine rather than performative congratulations. "I think we've shown what's possible," she said finally. "Not just for us, but for anyone who's been told their differences make them unlovable or incomplete." Noah nodded, his scarred hand finding hers in the gathering darkness. "That's worth everything we've been through to get here." "Everything," Eliza agreed, her free hand reaching up to trace the boundary between scarred and unscarred skin on his face, a gesture that had become one of their most intimate forms of connection and worth everything still to come. Above them, the stars continued their ancient patterns, witnesses to countless human stories of loss and recovery, limitation and transcendence. In the vast cosmic dance, Eliza and Noah were merely momentary participants, but in their union of imperfect bodies and determined spirits, they had created something timeless, proof that love, when built on genuine acceptance, could transform even the most damaged landscapes into something beautiful and new. 5 years after their wedding, Eliza and Noah Morgan Sullivan stood at the entrance to what had once been merely a dream, sketched on napkins during late-night conversations. The Adaptive Living Center of Riverdale, a combination rehabilitation facility, accessible housing complex, and community hub rose before them, its modern architecture incorporating universal design principles that made it accessible to people of all abilities without appearing institutional or medicalized. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "I still can't believe we actually built it," Eliza said, her wheelchair positioned beside Noah as they surveyed the building that had consumed their professional lives for the past 3 years. What had begun as a personal adaptation of their own home had expanded into a vision for transforming how communities approach disability and independence. "We did more than build it," Noah replied, his scarred hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "We created a blueprint for what's possible when accessibility isn't an afterthought." The journey to this moment had been neither straightforward nor easy. After their wedding, they had initially focused on merging their lives in practical ways, renovating Noah's house to accommodate Eliza's wheelchair while maintaining spaces suited to his height and specific mobility needs. What started as personal adaptations gradually evolved into innovations that caught the attention of others facing similar challenges. First came requests from friends for advice on home modifications. Then former patients of Eliza's began asking for consultations on creating more accessible living spaces. Noah's expertise in construction, combined with Eliza's understanding of mobility challenges, created a unique perspective that few architects or contractors could match. "We should write a guide," Noah had suggested one evening as they reviewed sketches for yet another friend's bathroom renovation. "Share what we've learned so people don't have to reinvent solutions every time." The guide became a blog, which grew into a consulting business, which eventually transformed into the ambitious project now standing before them, a comprehensive center dedicated to the principle that independence was not about doing everything alone, but about having genuine choices in how to live. "The first residents move in next week," Eliza reminded him, her voice betraying nervous excitement. "Real people whose lives will change because of what we've created." The center's residential wing featured 20 apartments, designed with various disabilities in mind, not as segregated special housing but as beautiful homes that integrated adaptations so seamlessly they enhanced the living experience for everyone. The rehabilitation wing included Eliza's expanded therapy practice alongside other services, ranging from occupational therapy to adaptive technology training. The community spaces from the cafe to the garden to the workshop were designed to bring together residents, visitors, and the broader community in environments where difference was accommodated rather than merely tolerated. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "There's still so much to do before the grand opening," Eliza said, mentally reviewing their extensive to-do list. "There always will be," Noah replied with the calm perspective that balanced her detail-oriented planning. "But today, let's just appreciate what we've already accomplished." They toured the building together, noting final touches needed before the public unveiling. The kitchen in the demonstration apartment needed slight adjustments to the counter heights. The signage in the east hallway required better contrast for visitors with visual impairments. Small details, but each one mattered to their vision of truly universal accessibility. As they moved through the community room, a light-filled space designed to host everything from support groups to art classes, they encountered Martin Chun, the center's newly hired activities director. A former Paralympic athlete who had lost both legs in a childhood accident, Martin embodied the center's philosophy that disability was simply one aspect of a complete human experience. "I was just setting up for tomorrow's pre-opening staff meeting," Martin explained, arranging chairs in a configuration that accommodated wheelchairs, standing participants, and everyone in between. "The volunteer coordinator has some amazing news about community partnerships." "Give us a preview," Eliza encouraged, always eager for positive developments. "The culinary program at Riverdale Community College wants to use our teaching kitchen for their adaptive cooking classes," Martin reported with enthusiasm. "And the university's occupational therapy department is requesting internship placements. Word is spreading faster than we anticipated." Noah nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "That's exactly what we hoped for, becoming a hub where different communities intersect rather than an isolated special facility." After Martin continued with his preparations, Eliza and Noah made their way to the therapy wing, where Eliza's expanded practice would soon occupy 4 specialized treatment rooms. The equipment had been selected with careful attention to accommodating therapists and patients, with various needs, adjustable treatment tables, transfer aids that maintained dignity, and technology that facilitated communication across disability barriers. "Remember your old clinic?" Noah asked as they surveyed the space. "The converted Victorian with the ramp one rebuilt that first winter?" Eliza smiled at the memory. It seems so small now, looking back. But it was where everything started, where we started. The reminder of their beginnings brought a moment of reflection. Their path together had not been without challenges. Noah's burns continued to cause pain during weather changes, or after particularly demanding physical work. Eliza still encountered days when her body's limitations frustrated her ambitions. They had navigated health insurance battles, skeptical investors who questioned the viability of an accessible living center, and personal moments of doubt about whether their vision was too ambitious. Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if we'd played it safe? Eliza asked as they paused by the window overlooking the center's courtyard garden. If we just focused on our careers and our home instead of all this? Noah considered the question with the thoughtfulness that had drawn her to him from the beginning. Safer, probably, easier in some ways. His scarred hand gestured toward the building around them. But I can't imagine being more fulfilled than I am right now, creating spaces where people can live with dignity instead of accommodation. The distinction was central to their philosophy, the difference between being accommodated as an exception and being included by design. It was the principle that had guided every aspect of the center's creation, from the width of doorways to the height of light switches to the design of the garden paths. It's strange, Eliza mused. I spent so many years after my accident focused on proving I could be independent, that I didn't need help or special treatment. But what we've built here isn't about independence in that isolated sense. It's about interdependence, about creating a community where everyone's needs are valid and visible. Noah nodded, understanding completely. True independence isn't about doing everything alone. It's about having choices in how you live, including the choice to ask for help when you need it. This revelation had transformed their approach to their own relationship as well. Early in their marriage, both had sometimes pushed past their body's limits rather than acknowledging vulnerability, each determined to prove they weren't a burden to the other. The resulting exhaustion and pain had forced honest conversations about the difference between martyrdom and genuine partnership. Ms. Morgan Sullivan? A voice interrupted their reflections as Linda Peterson, their project manager, approached with a tablet in hand. The mayor's office called about the ribbon-cutting ceremony next week. They're asking about accessibility requirements for the stage and whether you'll need any specific accommodations for your speech. Eliza exchanged a knowing glance with Noah. Despite their years of advocacy and the very nature of the center they'd created, they still regularly encountered the assumption that accessibility was a special accommodation rather than a universal requirement. Please remind them that the event can't proceed unless the stage is accessible to all participants and attendees. Eliza replied with the practiced patience of someone who had had this conversation countless times. And that accessibility isn't just about ramps for wheelchairs, but also about sound systems for those with hearing impairments, visual contrast for those with sight limitations, and seating options for people who can't stand for extended periods. After Linda departed with these instructions, Noah chuckled softly. 5 years of marriage, 3 years developing this center, and we're still educating people about the basics. That's why this matters, Eliza replied, gesturing toward the building around them. It's not just about the physical space, it's about changing how people think about disability and design. As evening approached, they completed their inspection tour and headed toward the apartment they'd established near the center, a space that served as their temporary home during the hectic final stages of the project. The residential configuration incorporated all they had learned about creating a home that worked for both of them. Counters at multiple heights, doorways wide enough for Eliza's wheelchair, but with handles positioned for Noah's reach. A bedroom designed for Eliza's transfer needs while accommodating Noah's occasional pain-induced restlessness. We should check on the house renovation progress tomorrow, Eliza suggested as they prepared a simple dinner together, moving through their kitchen with the synchronized efficiency of long practice. The contractor promised the bathroom modifications would be finished this week. Their permanent home, the farmhouse outside town that they'd purchased last year, was undergoing extensive renovations to transform it into both their private sanctuary and a showcase of beautiful universal design. Unlike the institutional adaptations that characterized most accessible housing, their vision integrated accessibility features into an aesthetic that celebrated rather than disguised their needs. "Speaking of checking on things," Noah said carefully, setting plates on the table with his good left hand, "Dr. Patel's office called while you were meeting with the therapy staff. They have your test results." Eliza's hands stilled on the salad bowl she was carrying. The medical tests were part of their cautious exploration of family planning options, a journey complicated by her spinal cord injury and the potential risks pregnancy might pose to her health. "Did they say?" Noah shook his head. "Just that the doctor wants to discuss the results in person. Our appointment is tomorrow at 4. The possibility of parenthood had emerged gradually in their marriage, evolving from a tentative what if to a serious consideration as they established their lives together. "Today we open these doors," Eliza concluded, "not just to those who will live and work here, but to a future where design begins with human diversity rather than adding it as an afterthought, where independence means having choices rather than doing everything alone, where communities recognize that we are all temporarily able-bodied, all potentially in need of spaces that flex to meet our changing capabilities." As the ribbon was cut and the crowd erupted in applause, Noah leaned down to whisper in Eliza's ear, his words meant for her alone amid the public celebration. "Ready for our next impossible thing?" Eliza looked up at him, at the scarred face that had become the landscape of her heart's home, and smiled with the certainty of someone who had learned that limitation was often merely a failure of imagination. "With you, always." Together, they moved forward into the building they had created, and toward the future they would continue to design not despite their broken bodies but because of the wisdom those bodies had taught them. That true strength came from vulnerability acknowledged, that independence was meaningless without connection, and that love built on genuine acceptance could transform even the most challenging terrain into something beautiful and new. As visitors flowed into the center behind them, exploring spaces designed to welcome bodies of all configurations and capabilities, Eliza and Noah symbolized a truth their lives had demonstrated, that the most powerful human response to brokenness wasn't denial or surrender, but creative adaptation, the courage to build something different when conventional paths proved inaccessible. In a world that worshipped perfection and feared limitation, they had chosen to embrace the full complexity of human embodiment. And in that embrace, they had discovered not just how to survive their respective injuries, but how to thrive beyond them, creating spaces, relationships, and eventually a family that honored rather than disguised the beautiful imperfection of being human. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.